The following episode of the Carnival of Randomness is sponsored by an important message to you, the people, from Upsitnik and Associates. Every day there are forces that are taking from you, stealing from you. Your money, your time, your freedom. Immense faceless corporations, banks, credit card companies, insurance providers, government agencies, this list goes on and on. When you are under attack and facing crisis, turn to us, Upsitnik and Associates, attorneys for you, the people. When every day becomes a battle, we can advise and assist. We have been advocates for 40 years. Email us through upsitnikslaw.com or call us at 1-866-391-3299 or reach out to us through Upsitnik and Associates on Facebook for a prompt, no obligation communication and consultation. Don't be pushed around.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Carnival of Randomness. And I'm Comrade Rob, and there's Comrade Zach.
Mazel tov.
Did you know for a fact that if you see the modern Italian flag, Napoleon invented it, the tricolor, it's like the blue, black, and rouge, but this is green because I guess Napoleon's favorite color is green, and this has no freaking bearing on what we're doing today. But I think the idea is how things last because the works of William Shakespeare span through the centuries. So I tie that together.
I don't understand really how you managed to do that, but every time
we have
it
once
just
again
comes
one
right
of our
back
best
around.
friends, one of our friends of the carnival, Mario. And hello.
Hey everybody. Hey guys.
And coming up this week is the next big production from DVC.
It is this Thursday.
Yes,
Thursday.
because this will be out on Monday.
This will be airing tomorrow.
Right. So running Thursday through Saturday, December 5th through 7th.
This is Rouslana and Jelena.
Oh yeah.
Got the
Why
thing
don't I
right here
announce
for
that?
you.
So I guess I'm directing a show called Rouslana and Jelena: A Modern Day Russian Revolution, and it is a manipulation of a transformation of or compilation of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, presented in a way that's hopefully innovative and interesting. So the idea was initially, all right, so I'm an English teacher, and I have a fondness for Shakespeare. And a couple of years ago, I decided that I was going to try to do this trilogy thing where every year we'd tackle a Shakespeare show in an interesting new way. And so in 2017, it was Titus Andronicus, which is a show a lot of people had been wanting to see because it's one of his earlier works and bizarre.
I had to hand it to Pat.
Because your hand
Well,
gets
I
cut off.
took my friend Heather to it, and I just remember telling her, "Have you ever heard Titus before? You're in for something a tad.
Yeah, you're in for a little
It's
thing
interesting. 3 hands actually get cut off in the course of Titus, but before intermission. So, and then last year I was able to collaborate with some people with screenplays who was doing a version of Hamlet, and although that wasn't technically DVC. Large portion of the cast and crew was DVC affiliated, and then I just had this in my mind for quite a long time, and so it just seemed like the time was right to do it. I actually had it kind of germinating around for many, many years. This idea of a Romeo, a Russian. The Russian aspect I think came in probably about 10 years ago, but even before that, I was talking to some of my students when DVC was a club still at Wilson High School before it became a community theater group, and a couple of girls were talking to me about this idea of doing a gay Romeo and Juliet, and the idea of having the characters be 2 men or 2 women, and obviously this has been done in some form or another before, for sure, but the idea of modernizing it and placing it in a location that is certainly getting some press for its anti-humanitarian and anti-gay legislation, and just made an interesting thing to explore. Okay, what happens if we're exploring this forbidden relationship between these 2 families as a result of something more than just this long, forgotten feud that they talk about in the show from time to time.
DVC stands for Dream, Visualize, and Create.
Yeah.
And I didn't even remember that, but it's on a little flyer.
So you can know that way. Yeah, dream, visualize, create. And that's So DVC did stand for something else many years ago, but then when I changed it over, I had to keep the same letters because kids were like getting it tattooed on them and stuff. That would be really wrong.
Dude, I'm sorry you tattooed that because
by the way,
that's probably one reason I will not do like message boards or like groups on Facebook, because there was an anti-gay discrimination group, and I actually wrote something about, if you think how things are here, there's like over 84 countries in the world where homosexuality is a crime. It's punishable by death. Somebody called me a judgmental jerk judging the countries.
Well,
how dare you?
I just sat back and go, what the hell?
I mean, there's certainly, I guess, an understanding that, people in the world have their own cultures and ideas and lifestyles, but when you violate people's human rights, I think you lose the opportunity to kind of.
So I just gave up. Yeah. I'm like, what the hell?
You kind of lose that battle when you're when the decisions you're making are affecting people's lives in terrible ways.
Plus, you got the other person who said, "I think you're wrong, sir." And he's going on about how bad homosexuality is. I'm going, look, I'm going to talk to people I know are intelligent.
Yeah, it's better to waste what precious little time on this blue marble we have talking to people that you actually care about.
Yeah, you just can't. Unfortunately, there's some people that are not going to.
And we've actually had lately, we've talked a lot about the Pride Parade in Rochester's community, and we're really talking about the idea that to be able to be who you are. Mm-hmm. And what the hell's wrong with that?
That's a concept.
Yeah, God forbid.
And I was telling this story about years ago. I was at Bop Fest back in Village Gate when we had, and the Pride Parade went by, and I saw these two guys dressed as Tinkerbell. And I'm just looking at them. They're going around anointing everybody. They couldn't help me. They tried. Yeah. But I just said, these guys are having fun. What the hell's wrong with it?
Well, that's what it is. Like, why are people... The problem I've had is, why are people so concerned about things that don't affect their lives?
Yes, and why do they have the strange perception that somehow those other people's choices and lifestyles and ideas do affect their lives? Maybe it's this feeling like we have to be in everybody else's business somehow.
I mean, there is that, and I think there's also that judgmentalism if you're brought up to follow the script of life, and there's that, like, square peg. And I remember one of my comments I used to make years ago was, two women holding hands, two men holding hands. I don't think they're going to make the economy crash, start a war, bring down society.
Cesar Romero didn't crush the economy back in the 60s.
As it turns out. Yeah. So I do think, I guess when we're getting on this topic about talking about people who there's no talking to some people or you can't change people's minds, certainly that does exist to some degree. But clearly I have to believe that art can in some way change people's perceptions of things. I've seen it happen. I've seen people that I know that told me that they were opposed to gay marriage and couldn't really explain why, but just felt that way. And then I'd talk to them a year or two later and they'd say, oh, I've changed my mind on that. And I'd say, it's because you met people or came to some understanding, or no, it's because their favorite characters in a TV show ended up getting married.
Whatever the reason.
I've had people who've had those kind of views and they've changed over the years, basically because one of my friends who used to be like that, he worked in the medical field and he met a lot of people of that persuasion there, and he said they're the nicest people I met. And it's like oh, which you don't understand, you fear. The thing.
Well, anybody that we don't know. I mean, obviously we have this problem throughout our country. The world,
really,
in many ways, because it's very easy to look and judge people that you feel like you don't, that aren't a part of your small world, or that you feel like you don't know.
And I could say, just from my own trip, I was in the USSR in 1990, and the people there were very gracious, very nice.
Did anybody else hear helicopters coming for you?
Nothing. I mean, yes, okay, it was Boris and Natasha because the KGB followed us around, and it was too funny because it literally, we're looking at these guys are in trench coats following us around the hotel.
That's a little bit unnerving, but I definitely don't. I mean, this setting of the play is timely and relevant, but it says right in our production notes that it's not supposed to be some indictment or like, some real expose of like, Russia is bad because of this. I mean, the reality is that we can look at societies and go, oh, we don't do that. But how far back do you have to go in our own history?
When we were doing that.
Right, exactly.
Not very far.
There's a lot involved in that, right? And there's a lot of other things, because when you get involved in people's religion, and Russia's very religious now, which is interesting, because when they were the evil, godless
they had
communists.
It when they were.
Right. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, and yet there's so much nicer now that they're all...
I had them because there was perestroika when I was there, so I got a picture in front of St. Isaac's, and they were opening it up there. So they was opening it up more than they had they were doing stuff like that, but it was so godless, before, everything.
Yeah, oppressing people in the name of your religion is always an interesting.
But the thing is, Shakespeare again. You go back to
the
Shakespeare.
Soviet Union.
Yeah, for sure.
You go back to Shakespeare, and I'll go back. I speak a lot about. Somebody will say, I've never read Shakespeare. And I say, well, did you watch all those 1990s teen movies? You saw Shakespeare. Because a lot of those were just plots from Shakespeare. Shakespeare has been with us. I think he died was 1618. It's around there from
16, I believe. But
damn!
We fact check that.
Pretty damn good.
Well,
though. Still,
which
16, because he died.
Right.
He died at 52.
Or did he?
Or did he? Plus,
He's
Francis
a movie
Bacon.
usher in
Plus,
Nashville.
anyways, Francis Bacon wrote all this stuff, anyways, as we know.
Right.
So it's all but the time. But I think what he did was he took simple concepts and he used them to tell so much more. Hamlet's just about. But what is it about? Like this
Everything.
is yes.
I keep leaning into this. Have you noticed?
It's all right.
For dramatic
But like
effect.
MJ, I told her when she played Hamlet, I said, okay, now, your character, is he insane or is he a sane man playing insane? And she's like, I'm not telling you. It's like, screw you.
Well, because that's open to the actor and the director's
Love you,
interpretation.
MJ.
No, she did a really good job.
Yeah,
though, but
yeah,
again,
well,
because it
MJ
made
will be
you
listening
think
to
about.
this, so you might want to throw that in there.
Yeah. I brought it back from.
I don't
from
mean
the
that screw
precipice.
you either. I love you, you know that. But I remember watching it going, okay, is this person just trying to play insane to try to get to the truth? Or are they insane? Or
Well, and that's the beauty of it, of not just Shakespearean plays, but plays in general. It's like the playwright writes it with something in mind, and then they probably have to sit back and go, I like how many people are taking a different
well, then there's the
interpretation.
famous Monty Python skit where they get the guy, where they got the home for overacting, and they got all these pirates, and they got
that
all the
was
Shakespeare
fantastic.
guys going.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
But how do you adopt this then? You just grab
Okay.
it, and I said, you said this was not your favorite play.
I'm happy to mention that. So, with a piece like Hamlet last year, where we had to cut the play down about 2.5 hours, it was rough because you see all these lines that have such like you're like, oh, I'm really into this line. It sounds great, or the imagery's amazing, or it's vital to the plot. And with Romeo and Juliet, I really feel like I'm very familiar with it. Obviously, I've seen it staged quite a few times. I've taught it. Back in my earlier days of teaching when I had 9th grade classes, I taught it a pretty good amount. And so I don't want to say that I don't like it. I think that the key here is that Shakespeare's themes clearly hold up, right? 420 years later, there's this idea that these ideas that he expressed, and look, he stole these story ideas too, right? They just pass this on, right?
I've said this
Yeah.
a million times. Read Metamorphoses I read Metamorphoses by Ovid and go, I knew who else read this.
Yeah.
Well, it's the thing. Like, he didn't invent anything. It's just he put a
And
he put
these
a
were
different
people.
spin on it.
Oh,
Right.
we're
For the
snobby.
times.
We're snobby about Shakespeare. These are for your common people. They would come and do plays. All
They
over.
really were, and people came and if they understood what was being said, then they did, or and if they didn't, they just followed along and they thought it was funny when there was a joke or somebody got bit by a dog or there was a sword
Or they
fight.
drank a lot of mead and freaking anything would have been funny. But that's another story.
There's a reason why every couple scenes some character summarizes everything that just happened in extreme detail. So that's the kind of stuff that I was able to get rid of. In the beginning of the play, it does say these 2 hours traffic of the stage, and if you've seen an unedited Romeo and Juliet, that's a total lie. The play is over 3 hours long. I've seen a 3-hour, 15-minute one. And so it just got pretty extensive. And I have to say that we were very liberal in our cuts. And even during the process, we'd say, are these 3 lines really important to what we're doing right now? And it's not a judgment on the writing or whether a certain scene is impactful or not. It's about the idea of how does it serve our story? We have a particular story we're telling with this piece, just like we did with Titus. So some things were not necessarily relevant. And
Do you ever get the anal retentive person like me, though, like when you do a music one or something, and wait a second, that lyric was wrong, or some really pedantic person going, well, you took out this part.
I'm looking forward to people afterward
it's going to happen.
throwing tomatoes. There are a couple of pretty significant alterations in the play. And also we some language a little bit for flavor purposes. We put in a couple of common Russian terms. And the names are Russian, and I mean that's don't think too deeply about that because then you're
late.
like, aren't they always speaking Russian? Why would they say a Russian word?
Because
in that?
maybe we can't understand you if this is in Russian. Maybe that's why.
Maybe the Russian words are the only words we do understand.
Yes, and the other one, like I'll go back to one of my favorites of years ago was Measure for Measure, where they did it like as a speakeasy, and they did all that, and that was
Jay was
really
part of
cool.
that
And I
show,
thought
too.
that was really fun the way they did it. They actually had people dancing like at the beginning, and it was done in that period.
I believe
And then
Judy
you go,
Molnar directed that.
Yes, I can't. I remember Aaron was in it, and MJ and everyone.
Yep.
But I also remember, like, I think there
Props.
was a Macbeth with Sir Ian McKellen, which is like World War II, World War I. And I think the latest one, Coriolanus with Ray Fiennes, that was in a different era too.
Yeah, there's plenty of versions. Obviously, there's a different Hamlet every
Every
I guess
3 hours.
The Ethan Hawke one with Bill Murray as
3 hours.
Laertes.
Oh,
I'm a
geez.
pretty big fan of the David Tennant 2009 one that they did. That's
I
pretty
thought
interesting.
that was really good.
But it's really interesting to see. You can watch 4 different Hamlets and see the character. I mean, the show too, obviously, but the character itself be significantly different in different parts, and that's important. So
And I think that's the beauty of it too, is that any actor, it's got to be great because you don't have this tight, rigid, thing dictated where you have to play it this way. You can just do your interpretation.
Right. I mean, Shakespeare only gives us the stage direction consists of they fight, he dies, exit. Like that's the kind of stuff you get. So from a director standpoint, it's both like this freeing, amazing experience and also a little bit of a nightmare because if you don't know what to do with it, you don't get any help.
And I would also think for the story of Romeo and Juliet, it's almost as like the individual versus the society because you have the two people seeking happiness with all these forces pushing against them, their family, the society. In the old days, because the houses were different, they hated each other. It was like the early Hatfields and McCoys.
I was going to say, that's basically what it was, the predecessor to the Hatfields and
See,
McCoys.
if they didn't read that play, they wouldn't have feuded.
That's
Didn't it stem
Probably
from
not
somebody
accurate.
killing a chicken or something?
It's my show. I can say what I want.
okay. Your show too, right? Okay.
Sometimes I'm along for the ride. But,
I understand.
but no, like, don't...
No, the idea of two people in Shakespeare's time, their characters younger than our characters in the play right now, because Juliet was not quite 13, but that's 400 years ago.
That was
so
400 years
it's a
ago.
little
So
awkward
that's
now.
okay. It's okay.
So
It was a different time back
so
then.
that's
it
a little
was.
that's changed a little bit. She's
Of age.
she's right. Well, Russia. You're 16. Although if to get married without your parents' consent, you need to be 18, I guess. But not I guess. I looked it up. I just don't want to seem too much like I'm throwing Wikipedia
I don't want to seem
facts
like
at
I
you.
know what the hell I'm
Well,
talking
that's like
about.
one of the things about our podcast is like we will make mistakes and
Oh, I make
everything.
mistakes all
And
the
the thing
damn
is, we
time.
always say because we tried to just not be regurgitate Wikipedia, but that's very good of you.
Yeah. Well, no, it was worth exploring because when we had to sit down and figure out how old is she going to be, there were two factors. One, how many syllables was in the word because the iambic pentameter is kept intact through 99% of the show. So if you're into that kind of thing, this is the thing. So we decided we're using the old school Shakespearean language, and although a lot of it is cut, it still has the meter. It still has all of those the elements of language that Shakespeare nerdy people like. But at the same time, it's also modernized and setting and costuming and staging. The very strong intent toward making the conversation, the words very conversational, very casual. So that way we can sort of alienate everyone, the people that love the traditional Shakespeare and people that are like, can you make these words different? But I think the actors in this show are doing an amazing job of taking the piece, which granted is not Shakespeare's most complicated piece from a plot standpoint, and finding a way to make it feel very modern and real. And I think that anybody would be able to, not just because they have an idea of the general plot of Romeo and Juliet, but legitimately understand maybe a lot of the language and moments that they may not necessarily have gotten seeing a more formal, traditional
Well,
version.
and again, the cast is again a bunch of our friends who've been on the show many times and are very, very talented. But why don't we go through the cast a little bit?
Okay, great. I would love to do that. So there's Rouslana and Jelena. Oh, and so I feel compelled to do this too. So there's no J in Russia. I just want to throw that out there, right? It says Jelena and it's a J because R and J, it's Romeo and Juliet, right? We're an English audience seeing this show. But legitimately, that would be like a Y and whatever. Okay, so at least we're past that. All right.
Patrick told me that too because I told him I had problems.
Helicopters. Okay.
I hear a bear.
We're
and a
putting
Russian
on the
guy.
Ritz.
So, right. But obviously there's concessions for that. When you look in the program, obviously we decided to write things in English, etc. So you have to live with those things. So Rouslana, our two main characters, Rouslana and Jelena. Rouslana's played by Alexus Maxim, and she's been in DVC for quite, in the past 3 or so 4 DVC shows. A great discovery. We actually found her when she auditioned for Screenplay's Hamlet and played Ophelia in there to MJ's Hamlet. The two of them had some really good chemistry. Alexus, as it turns out, knows so much about theater and is in fact our set designer and is in fact hauling over really heavy objects right now and starting to put them together.
I have the moment where, again, don't try to be pretentious about my literary knowledge, because we were at the Mandragora show with MJ. I'm talking to Alexis, and I just like, I'll quote something from The Tempest, and she finished. I was in the show.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Right. So Alexis is great and is not only taking on that responsibility of playing that character, that iconic character, but also putting doing the set design and in the process of constructing it. And then Gwen Scott, or Artemis Scott, depending on, she's going as Artemis Gwen P. Scott in the program right now, is playing Jelena. And I've known this kid since, I say she's in her mid-20s, but like I taught her, right? She was part of when DVC started at Wilson Megid High School with the Wilson High School students wanting to get together and do something in the arts, because we had no arts program. We didn't even have a music program at that point. And so she came in pretty early on, and I've known her since she was in 10th grade, and so she's been involved in many DVC shows.
Oh no, it was actually Midsummer Night's Dream with Alexis. Like, even I can't get my plays right.
Well, they're just Shakespeare. They're all kind of
They're all the same.
The comedies
You
are
read
all
one,
the
you read them
same.
all.
Right. Right. And obviously, we have MJ playing the Mercutio character, Shura. If you're saying that's not the same amount of syllables, I know. We had some interesting time putting in lots of descriptors to keep that that going along. Everyone else has the same amount of syllables. That's the character. That Mercutio character is the character that everyone, I think, attaches to. Romeo's kind of yeah, he really is. And
Let's be frank, he's
Sidekicks
kind
are
of a
always the
douche.
best, though. Like the guys, they always have the beady. They're always the most enjoyable, I think, sometimes, because they don't have to carry the load and they can be sort of mysterious.
Right.
They hide in the background and then all
Be the person, everything like that.
Yeah. So it's great. We have some, with DVC, we always do this idea of blind casting. So we have some interesting ideas. We have some interesting twists. We have Catherine Sanford playing Friar Lawrence, Presbyter Boris, as a man, as Boris. And then we have Patrick White playing the nurse character as a male, as the butler. So, as Jelena's kind of personal valet. So, so that's an interesting take. We very easily could have just had Catherine play the nurse and Patrick play Boris, but this seemed way more interesting. So it's great working with them. And then, Miles Harrison, another kid, we have a pretty big U of R connection, because a lot of my DVC students go on to U of R when they graduate from Wilson. So we have a couple of college kids involved in production, as always. So Miles plays Benvolio. We have Joey Chacon, who I've worked with a lot in DVC. He's done a lot of stuff. He's a high-energy presence, playing that Paris Pushkin character. Amy Canfield, Sean Birch, Vince Dalba, Summer Satora. I think I've hit everyone, but if I shout out a name randomly during the rest of this, that's because I forgot.
It's 6 degrees of randomness, too, because Dave Harrison, his father, comes on the show and does shows here. And he met Patrick. He's like, my son's done stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that little connection.
So that's cool. But it's amazing these days. I'm always glad to hear how kids get into Shakespeare still. It's great. We actually have someone from my making her stage debut. Shayrana is a student in my 11th grade class, and honestly, she asked about DVC, and I said, yeah, come back when we're working on another next show maybe, and we'll figure something out, because I just met her this year. And we were reading Hamlet in class, and she was doing such a great job of reading it. I was like, something comes up. Do you want to jump in now? And we needed somebody for the character that plays Rouslana, Romeo's kind of assistant,
who's Balthazar, who's just basically in the beginning and the end of the show, more or less. And she was like, yeah, I'll do it. And that's been great. So it's key, obviously key to DVC, to increasing the family, is bringing in people at that age. And that's where I'm meeting the kids in high school. And some of them never go away. And I mean that in a very good way.
It's cool. What I enjoy, too, is going to shows for eons now, is seeing how they progress and where they go and how they stay around and go, wow, I remember that when this is doing this, and now they're back here. And it's like a little community. It's great.
Yeah, it's a great group. I've worked with almost all of these people
And
before.
isn't it cool to hear what they go on to do, too, sometimes, and go, wow.
Katie Keating playing Tybalt. I think that's the last one.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So that's interesting. Katie and MJ, of course, have the fight scene. I don't think I'm spoiling anything in Romeo and Juliet to let you know that.
I was going to go see it.
But, well, I didn't say what happens in the fight scene.
You're ruined.
Do you have any, one ahead, any dream ones ahead you'd like to still do? Like a big one? Or
So I'm sure at some point. So I'm taking a little break from Shakespeare for a while, and maybe a break from theater after DVC's 20th anniversary show in July, because I've been at this for quite a while. It's a little tough to maintain and do the teaching thing full time. But I'm going to take a little break from Shakespeare for a while, but I'm sure I'll come back to it at some point.
I hope the one trite one I don't want to see, because it would be too much cliche, would be doing Macbeth in the White House.
I don't see myself doing Macbeth. I've taught Macbeth many times. I know it very well. I don't see myself doing it. Believe it or not, the idea of doing Antony and Cleopatra has been kicked around quite a bit. I saw a production of it in Stratford probably close to 10 years ago now, and it's rarely performed. I found it to be interesting. It also has that kind of, if you saw that TV show Rome that was done with the BBC and HBO, there's very interesting second season. I love that. I go back and watch that again. I'm very interested in it.
The problem with the second season was they told them midway through that they were shit canning, and so they just had to go ape shit for the last 4 or 5 episodes.
I totally agree, but it was fun watching Mark Antony and Cleopatra be weirdos. Yeah. That was very Shakespearean, by the way. Two guys that were fictional characters were thrown into an historical setting and kind of stumbled around and somehow were a part of all these major events.
It just popped in my head. I talked to I sent MJ a message about this. For some weird reason, the climate we're in and everything else, I told her, I know you don't like singing, but would you ever want to do a cabaret? And she actually said she'd love to be like the Joel Grey character.
Oh yeah, that's a great character to take on.
Because I'm thinking these times would almost be really cool to have one of those.
Yeah, there are very interesting productions of cabaret. That's a show that a lot of people have done a lot with different productions of it, revivals of it, the same script altered a little bit in direction and design. That's a show where you see a lot of people do some interesting things or take some interesting risks, particularly when it comes to the end of the show. So they haven't taken the big risk of making a happy ending at the end of the show, though, and I think that's probably for the best.
But that's always cool, because you always go outside the box and all the things, and they're always interesting. You could just play it safe and do it, but you never do, and I love that.
Yeah, DVC's intent is affordable, relevant, socially conscious, so we need to... and we kind of go off the idea that if for every brand new thing that we do, because we do a lot of original productions, we also like to go back and reinvent something that has already existed.
Kind of like this.
Kind of like this, yeah. Hopefully you come and see this and go, that's a Romeo and Juliet. Look, no one... And once you get to a certain age and experience in life, there's no one that needs to see another standard version of Romeo and Juliet. So it's about time to, I think, recognize that the show is still relevant and its themes are still meaningful, but we can put them in a format that is going to be somewhat original and more relevant to a modern society, to today's society.
And that, like what Rob said, especially with Romeo and Juliet, coming from the Shakespearean era up to the 90s with all the teen angst movies, they took it and reimagined it with angsty kids, in the modern day, and people were like, oh, this is great.
10 Things I Hate About You, Taming of the Shrew.
Exactly. So many Shakespearean ideas perforated those movies in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s.
Yes, that's the thing. And the other thing is, I'll mention off the topic a little bit, but I think, are you having another anniversary of one of your music ones next year? Is that the...
So, right, that's July. We have 2 weekends. Woo! You don't have to tear the set down 24 hours after it's finally up. okay, 72 hours. Usually you make sure you look at it like the day before you open. You're like, it's perfect. And then you take it all down 3 days later. We have a 2-weekend run of a show called More Than This that we find pretty, we first staged it in 2013. I had a conversation with, a couple of high school students, my student Jess Leanne, who was like, we talked about the music of Vanessa Carlton and how, I was like, I can make a story out of this. And she said, really? You're going to do that? And I said, you know what? If Vanessa Carlton writes you a letter and tells you can use her music, we're doing a play. And I remember that was on a Friday. She came back to me on Monday and said, all nervous. And she was like, I think I got an email from Vanessa Carlton.
Did she say something about it?
And I went and I looked. We went into her email and I'm like, "Yep, that's her management." And they just got back to you and said she would be honored or whatever. So we did it, and it was the biggest production. It's maybe still. At Swim 2 Boys would take the title now, but it's one of the largest productions we've ever done. And it was our first one with all live music for all of the numbers with a band, so that was a big deal for us. And it just made sense for the 20th anniversary of DVC to return to something that has a lot of meaning for us as far as a leap forward that we took. And that second weekend is going to be our 20th anniversary reunion weekend, so we've got some things planned. Probably won't be sleeping for 3 days.
That's one thing I want to... It's the summer. It'll be nicer.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. I'd love to actually have Alexus on, have some people on, because actually one thing I used to do in college a little, and I'm fascinated by, is set building. And I remember going to the Bolshoi, again in Russia, to tie it in. And just one of the things for me was like watching... It was actually they had an opera there, and... I was looking more at the sets because I just think sets are cool. And this whole idea of you have to get them on, off, build them, take them down, I think we'll make it interesting. If we have a show on it.
Oh, we could definitely make that interesting because it is interesting.
For sure.
And some of the stories about the cow falling off the stage or something or, something else. But I think it's really cool because that was my contribution because we did, 12th night one time, and I was involved with that part, just with the sets and everything. So that was, and I just really kind of like it. I think it's really kind of neat. There's the word.
Yeah, it's neat's always an interesting.
Yeah,
interesting's the other
one.
Not
when you have to haul it and everything and take it down and put it up. Maybe that's not so neat. But
So this production is fast paced, which I think is. Another interesting thing, music, although we don't have live music in this, we've definitely incorporated some montage elements and some interesting things.
The 80s montage.
Right? You can hear people talking to each other in long speeches for 10 minutes, or you can put it all into a wordless 3-minute musical montage.
That's better.
So, right. I mean, especially since the other version is the one that you see all the time, right? I mean, if Shakespeare was all about musical montage, I'd probably be like, hey, let's turn this into some language. But it's interesting to kind of to do that. So, and it's been a real pleasure putting on this play.
Yes.
About Tsar-crossed lovers.
There you go.
To the T, the star. And so you should be rushing to go see it.
Yes, and tell us and everything. And again, I will say,
I
love Muck. Muck's like a little home to me. I've been going there for years.
Too much.
It's a nice place to park. It's a nice theater and everything. But it's on from the 5th to the 7th.
Right. It's December 5th. That's Thursday at 7:30. Friday, December 6th, 7:30, and then we overdose on Saturday. We have a 2 o'clock matinee, and then a 7:30 on Saturday, December 7th. That's your last chance to catch it. So
you want to come down. The thing about me, I'm glad I get the times because the last thing I went down to, I should have looked. It was at 7. I thought it was at 8. That would have been good to walk in on.
It's very important to DVC that our tickets are, as I said, affordable to the world. So right now, go to the website. The pre-sale tickets are less money than you're going to pay at the door.
And I say this a lot about things is
ample parking.
Ample parking.
I mean, there is shows you can go to like Hamilton, for example, which will cost your car, but then you can see really, really quality things that will not break your bank.
I know. Do we talk about money here, or is that like a?
Well,
it's a radio show.
It's okay.
The student ticket prices. DVC's thing is no matter what show we do, whenever we do it, no matter where we do it, online or at the door, if you're a student of anything, anywhere, it's $5. So, I mean...
I'm a student of history. Does that count?
Yes.
We don't never been asked that one before.
We don't check IDs, but we check yours. Just to make sure you're...
It's all like my dad, the one time we're going golfing, and I'm like a teenager, and he tries to get senior things, and the person up there goes, he looks pretty young. That's my dad.
Yeah, so, no, I mean, it's always, we're talking, single-digit ticket prices if you buy them ahead of time.
Basically about what you would spend on a coffee at Starbucks, if not less.
Yeah, so don't buy that. And I mean, there's like, the caramel ones have like 700 calories or something in them anyway.
Not picking on Starbucks, but their coffee is
and
delicious,
again,
but it is expensive.
just so you know, again, Mario's a very good sport. He's part of our D&D team, so he does that. So.
I didn't realize we were going there today.
No, we're not.
Okay.
I'm just going to mention it.
No, it's okay.
Brief mention.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So I died.
That's weird. A theater person involved in role-playing.
Yeah, who the hell knew that would have been a thing?
Amazing,
So
though.
weird.
But one day maybe we'll do a Shakespearean one. I don't know what I'll play, but maybe we'll do one like Shakespearean.
Do you know how hard it is to die in 5th edition D&D?
Yes, apparently. That's why I titled the episode of Death in 5th Edition.
So I texted a friend of mine.
Oh, Christ.
Right. I think we were still playing during the break. And I was like, somebody died in 5th edition. He wrote back, died? And I said, yeah. And he said, what'd they do, split the party? And I went, yup.
Well, when we took that break, I went outside and I called a friend of mine, and she just started laughing. So I can't wait, because her son is a big D&D player.
I can't say enough, like being a fan of DVC and everything in live theater all these years. This is always really quality. You'll really enjoy yourself. So come on out and see it.
Get your asses to the play.
Yeah, please. We greatly appreciate it. DVC is about our community, and it's great to have people there to share the experience with. And thank the two of you for having me on the show.
And also at the end now, make sure I'm going to actually play a song, and it has nothing to do with this, but it's my friends the Fox Sisters. But I was thinking of something that would be Shakespearean, and there's a song by the Fox Sisters called "The Stars, Oh the Stars," and it's like "The Fault in Our Stars" or anything. I just like the song, and I want to play a song at the end.
When Romeo shouts, "I defy you, stars," Alexis's favorite line, but not really.
Tie-in.
I am Fortune's fool. That's the only thing I can remember.
Good line. Good line. So
don't let me go any further than that. Or I am Romeo's Julius' son. Or
I've never actually read
Unfortunately,
Shakespeare, so I got nothing.
Or the other line.
No, it is true. I have a difficulty reading plays.
The line I've heard they edited out. I drank what? And on that, thanks a lot, Mario.
A plague on both your houses.
It's already there. Thanks a lot.
Your heart is empty as the night wind sighs. All life's promises she's flies. Songs and scenes that open the door, but life shown you nothing worth dying for. Till she arrived and set the skies aflame. Fires without number, fires without name. Far beyond all this mortal frame. Stoke the fire in your soul again, and you swear love her eternally, and you swear now you found her, that nothing till death will part. Brave, lucky, sure and strong, the way you haven't felt in oh so long. Walk the streets like a king of men. Their world could never touch your heart again. Since she arrived and set the skies aflame. Fires without number, fires without name. Far beyond all this mortal frame. Spark the fire in your soul again, and you swear by the sea to love her eternally. And you swear now you found her, that nothing till death will you part. And the trees reach above to deliver down her love, and the stars, oh the stars, they fall down in their bright burning heart to spark light to your heart, in your heart. A fire to warm you and chase out the cold, a fire to loosen despair's icy hold, fire sent to guide you and lead you home out of the Your heart is empty as the night wind sighs. All life's promises she supplies. Songs and scenes that open the door. Life shown you nothing worth dying for. Till she arrived